The following is a look at the killers of Dead by Daylight, and any real-world equivalents they might have. Let's continue. Philip Ojomo, aka the Wraith. Philip Ojomo's early life is characterised by war, specifically the Nigerian Civil War from 1967 to 1970, which resulted in between 500,000 to 2 million dead. An early life marred by battle reminds me of both Andre Chikatilo and Luis Garavito, whose lives were also shaped by massive conflicts around them, Holodomor and various cartel conflicts respectively. But Ojomo is nowhere near as depraved or cruel as those killers, and in many ways had a trauma history worse than even them. I feel like I'm doing this fictional character a disservice to compare him to two of the worst and most prolific killers of my project. Isn't that odd? I'll come back to that. During the Nigerian Civil War, Ojomo, himself still just a child, lost both his parents and then his beloved grandmother. This is a triple bereavement, and we see his rage and madness grow and grow over the course of his tome. After being taken in by a group of survivors, Philip fell asleep while on watch, and they were murdered during his slumber. Ojomo witnessed a new friend dying in agony, and he was forced to euthanize her. Still just an infant, Ojomo caught up with the attackers and burnt them to death. The attackers would often use kerosene to burn the bodies of their victims, and here Ojomo uses their own tool against them and gets righteous retribution against 4 of the murderers after they fall asleep. That's pretty darn intense. This technically makes Ojomo a combatant in the Civil War, and thus a child soldier. There was one instance of burning alive during the course of my project from Charles Sabrage, who thought his victims were already dead and was trying to dispose of the corpses. But Sabrage, a Factor 1 psychopath and wicked conman, also has very little in common with the Wraith, so let's move on. Additionally, arson did come up a lot during my project, but the killers that utilised it in either childhood or during their murders also have nothing in common with Philip Ojomo. I just wanted you to know I am aware of how utterly useless I really am.
Much blood!
Ojomo was traumatised by the war and racked with both guilt and survivor's guilt. I don't think it's unreasonable to assume Ojomo came down with post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of his experiences. Exactly what happens to him over the next few years we don't know. But fast forward to the release base lore of this character, we skip to adulthood and see he's emigrated to the United States of America. I suppose he was trying to put all the violence and madness behind him. Ojomo got a job in a scrapyard and an auto-wrecker, crushing vehicles. But every fan of DBD knows what happened there. Unbeknownst to Philip, some, or possibly even every, car he crushed had a living person inside. The scrapyard was a front for very serious organised criminals. I don't think unknowingly killing people like this, however gruesome and grisly, even counts as manslaughter. He had no idea what was happening or why, although Ojomo did turn a blind eye to some other shady goings-on from his boss at the scrapyard, Azarov. But Philip's ignorance is exactly why Azarov used him. He was the perfect executioner. After finding out the truth when he saw a bound victim in one of the cars, Ojomo was devastated and enraged that he couldn't escape the violence that haunted him. So in a fit of madness he killed Azarov in his own crusher, tore his head off and fled. Again, I like the detail that Ojomo used the villain's own means to kill them. Now, we've seen enough plays, read enough grim stories, seen enough films, played enough games to know that vengeance is grossly overrated. And yet I can't seem to feel the lesson, despite it being a central theme of the Wraith's tome, the theme of forgiveness. I'm sure a lot of us have a great deal of sympathy for Ojomo and may even support his vigilante murders. I could liken him to Pedro Filo or Floresvaldo Oliveira, but Ojomo's victims definitely deserved it more, such as the advantage of being a fictional character, or maybe there were details about the war and the combatants that even he didn't know. But isn't it strange how we can feel more sympathy for a fictional character than a real person? Admittedly, Ojomo didn't kill innocent people like most real-world killers, but if he were tried in the United States, he'd still likely be imprisoned forever. Like it or not, Azarov had rights. Ed Kemper, Lee Malvo, and, once again, Pedro Filo all killed as children. But they weren't defending themselves like Philip was. At least I don't think so. Maybe it was more about vengeance, and thus the Wraith has more in common with Pedro Filo than I thought. And with a kill count of 5 or 6, with separate kills happening in different locations and times, Philip Ojomo technically counts as a serial killer by some loose definitions. But I really don't think Ojomo is a psychopath at all. His is not the emotionless void of psychopathy, but one of extreme trauma. I'd like to theorise Philip suffers from schizoid personality disorder, and getting a job at Azarov's was him trying to overcome it. Ojomo was a loner who had grown completely numb, cold, emotionless, solitary, no interest in relationships at all. However, Ojomo found his rage again when he learned he was, technically, still a killer, and now Azarov's skull is the Wraith's primary weapon. So taking the head in the first place, technically, counts as taking a trophy. Furthermore, villains or not, burning people to death and crushing Azarov in a crusher would certainly count as cruel and unusual in my project. Taking trophies was a common detail in the 100 SKP, even taking full severed heads. Ed Kemper did this, as well as Bundy and Dahmer. This isn't even mentioning Ed Gein, more of an inspiration for Leatherface, but still. And then the case of Catherine Knight. I don't recommend eating anything when reading about that one. One interesting thought is that skulls as trophies is actually quite common in the larger scope of humanity, or lack thereof, a further way to show your dominance at having snuffed them out, and is common in war. Is this some kind of subtle way to imply the Wraith is just as bad as the headhunters he dispatched, given he uses a skull as a weapon? If it is, I strongly disagree with it. Their memorial to the Rwandan genocide showcases dozens of skulls. That which is a symbol of power is also a symbol of tragedy. There are a few other serial killer cases, but Ojomo doesn't compare to any of them. He was no crazed sadist, but the entity might have confused Philip's oblivious murders via the Crusher with actual murders Ojomo was conscious of, hence why Philip was selected for the trials. I've explained before that the entity is kind of a moron, so it's possible. I seriously doubt this giant space octopus of bad hitboxes cares regarding the nuances of human lives and deaths, and probably half-asses its own hell. But that's the third tragedy. Once again, Ojomo is pulled into a world of violence he wants nothing to do with. His entire existence is endless night. His emotional agony goes a long way to separate him from not only the serial killers of my project, but most of the DVD cast. This is going to come up a few times, but some of the more sympathetic Dead by Daylight killers are clearly not psychopaths, or at least not to the same degree as those guilty of true serial murder. We've seen two very violent types of killing already, and we've not even reached the bad ones yet. And if the list of mining accidents was depressing, then the list of civil wars and genocides is transcendent in its misery. The Rwandan genocide, which I mentioned earlier, is particularly familiar to me thanks to the amazing film Hotel Rwanda. But how many more children wound up just like Philip Ojomo? And where will they take us while we did nothing? To make matters even worse, as I sit here in my admittedly modest dwellings with heating and clean water, however expensive, and a supermarket nearby, there is another very real genocide going on. The most documented genocide in history. And all I do is sit idly by and check in on the subreddit. One can't question it, as we all know what happens when you get tarred as anti-Semitic. If you want to talk about cancel culture, I've got a real case that never gets talked about. But I'm as helpless as I am useless. If you want to see what real anti-Semitism looks like, the 1985 French documentary Shoah is available in its entirety on YouTube. I watched all of it, and I would strongly recommend it. So, with that backstory established, Ojomo runs away and becomes a croaking tree thing that turns invisible by ringing a bell. Again, the backstory and the gameplay don't really connect. But unlike the Trapper, in the Wraith's tome his iconic bell was given significance, and very well so. It was his father's bell, so there's an emotional connection to it. I'd previously joked that Wraith uses the bell because he doesn't know what ambush means, but looking back, I can see he uses the bell as a warning in-game. It was supposed to be the warning bell of an attack, now given tragic irony. So every time he rings it, it's an indication of how reluctant he really is to hunt and kill in the trials. He's likely the most unwilling dragon under the entity's employ. I'm reminded of those hybrids from System Shock 2 that try to warn the player before they attack. Now, the Trapper was my first killer to finish his personal trial of 200 matches. Wraith was maybe the fourth? But unlike Trapper, Wraith still gets used a lot today, so not all of my best footage is from years ago. Why? I'm not too sure, to be honest. The Wraith is one of the easiest killers to play as. It's a very simple mechanic of hunting while invisible, turning visible, then striking. The Wraith has a very special place in my heart because he was actually the first killer I ever got to rank 1 with, weirdly, and in those days he was a low tier choice. Even then I knew he had potential, though I would remind everyone to run the Coxcomb Clapper or at least the Bone Clapper add-on. Seriously, there's at least a tier difference when you do. But that's not to say that's the only choice. Wraith must have one of the best add-on arsenals in the game, with many interesting combinations. I can't even make a top 5 without missing something interesting out. So he's had that going for him for quite a while at least. I think those 3 presets were introduced primarily for him. If anything, I want a 4th and 5th preset because this guy is just so flexible. Philip Ojomo ultimately killed those responsible for putting him in a dreadful situation he had no control over. I'd like to imagine that if the survivors and the sympathetic killers somehow take up arms against the entity itself, the Wraith would lead the charge, with a much more fitting type of ironic ring of his bell.
No! Wait! No! Wait! Wait!